Right. The same structure.
Same system. Voting was the decisive secret weapon. As the V began on November 4th, 1980, the entity President Carter was in Plains, Georgia to vote. Reporters on the scene said later that Carter almost broke down and cried as he was speaking to townspeople because the outcome was already known before the voting began. And he knew about it. That is also the reason for his unprecedented concession an hour before the West Coast polls had even closed. Word had reached the White House only the day before about what was going to happen. So let's again stop right there for a second. Imagine that you are President Carter, the President of the United States, and the day before the E actually happens, you get told, oh, don't worry, you're going to lose, we've rigged all the machines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once again, I hate to keep repeating this, but this is insane. And the guy said, don't worry, you're not going to win.
He was a part of the organization that was in control of doing it.
That's a good point.
Okay, and
That's
also this too. He was interested in UFO research because in Russia he saw one. At the same time all this is happening, he's the one pushing to try to ask for this information about UFOs.
He wanted real disclosure.
Okay, so
and he didn't get it.
And so here you go again. You're worrying too much, or you're paying attention to stuff that's none of your business, Jimmy. You need to start paying attention to peanuts. Because,
right, how about you stop paying attention to UFOs?
Yeah, because Billy talked a lot about this. His brother, Billy,
Billy Carter.
Talked a lot of, he was talking about how bad it hurt his brother. And then his sister, she was the evangelical person that was a big friend of the Penthouse guy. And,
right,
yeah,
Larry Flint.
Yeah, and so here this family became because he was one of the first UFOers.
That's right. And that might have been part of why they threw him out.
I'm not going to not let that go.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, back to the slide now. There was massive fixing of VMs in 9 states. Massive. So we're going to start with the massiveness. This is 1980 again, okay? Pennsylvania. That sounds a little familiar, doesn't it, folks? Florida. That sounds familiar. Ohio. Illinois. Michigan. Texas and California.
That's all your electoral college.
So that's, yep, there you go. All the swing states.
That wins.
The machines were also fixed, but on a less complete scale, in Indiana and Missouri. And in addition, there was selective fixing of machines in the key districts of more than 20 other states. It was all over before it started. This is based on his inside intelligence, of course. That means 31 out of 50 U.S. states, all the ones that matter, were already rigged. Now, instead of 40 years, I want to fast forward 20 years. And that brings us to the infamous 2000 presidential election. Remember if you saw this at the time or not. I'm going to get your real-time comments on this. Sherman Skolnick, his name is. And here he is holding a book on who's who in blankety blank, and we're not going to say the word or the acronym. But Sherman Skolnick was really awesome because he would go after corrupt judges. And so here he is, back in 1969, literally taking on the Illinois state election. There he is, taking on the very thing we were just talking about in the very time that we were just talking about, jumping in on that stuff that Peter was already talking about. Now this is what is so insane, Dannion. It was only insane to me at the time. Now it makes perfect sense in light of all this information. Peter Beater, going back to the slide again, predicted the 2000 election crisis in advance, in writing. I read it on the day it came out, Halloween 2000. And there's the link on Jeff Rentz's webpage. You can still go there right now. J. Rockefeller, quote-unquote, president. And remember, again, October 31st, 2000. And there he is saying, and this is before the election, this is days before, I have strong reasons, I'm going to just jump ahead and do it this way. I have strong reasons from profound sources to believe that a so-called emergency, the day it came out on October 31st, 2000, and I asked myself when it started to happen, how in the hell did he know that? Well, the answer is obviously he was on the inside, he had real information. So let's go back to that slide and read a little bit more here, where he says, and So he says again, I have strong reasons for profound sources to believe that a so-called emergency may follow the year 2000 presidential election. He said this on October 31st, before anything happened. Nobody would... I mean, Danny, just to remind people who weren't alive back then, was anybody expecting an emergency for the 2000 election?
No, it was governor for Texas. That means he could run. He had the Bush legacy. He had his father. He'd come in and he had all of that. And he had Al Gore, who was the vice president.
Reading this, Dannion, was one of the most mind-blowing things in my early career, because to get an intel briefing that says something that specific, and just days later it's freaking right.
I was going back to think of the J. Rockefeller interaction in my life at that time period. What was happening?
Let's finish reading this. So, I have strong reasons for profound sources to believe that a so-called emergency may follow the year 2000 presidential election, and there is a further scheme to install Nelson's brother, J. Rockefeller, as the unelected president or king of the U.S., all without having him on the presidential election ballot. Well, that didn't happen, but that's what they were ultimately jockeying for. But then Bush was able to outsmart them, obviously.
Right, absolutely.
That's what he did. Prior to the year 2000 presidential election, so-called pollsters and pundits made quite an effort to unhinge the brain of the average American with a barrage of quote-unquote polls. The only poll I respect is the one firemen slide down on from upstairs in the fire station when the bell rings. The polls are totally ridiculous. And they were wrong again.
And now we know that.
Yep.
I mean, think about what you're showing. You're showing a chronologue history of corruption that is now coming to a head. It's coming to a head, but having this viewpoint, David, is so important because it balances out what we're looking for as opposed to the edicts and crap we're listening to.
And what I'm going to say right now is that Skolnick's testimony is admit need be that I read this before the election, because you can prove it. A lot of people did. I don't know if you saw this.
No.
Had you ever been on Jeff Rentz's show?
No.
Okay. Neither had I. I've never been on Jeff Rentz. But anyway.
I don't know him.
He's never allowed me on his show, and I wish that he would have, but, it's a weird situation. Anyway.
I'm going to call him.
Same thing with Alex Jones. Alex has never let me on his show. But anyway, Jeff's website back then was really the only place to go to aggregate these kind of links together. It was the premier place to get this information. Everybody back then knew that. Since my story, this is Skolnick again. Since my stories are often so far ahead of the parade, they are often misunderstood by those without our benefit of some 1 million documents, records, tapes, and details from his insiders. I do not reveal my sources. I do not want to hear that one of my sources later was in a plane that somehow blew up, or that his or her body was found floating in the canal. Now look at this.
Happened all the time.
I know, and we could talk about that too, but everybody knows that. To protect my sources, I have, in the 40 years as an activist, been jailed 8 times for contempt of court simply for refusing to divulge the identity of my sources or how exactly in jail. And bless him for never ratting anybody out.
Amen.
I mean, that is so awesome. And so, again, this particular article influenced me so much, and Skolnick in general influenced me so much, that I decided from that day forward that I must adopt the same ethics code that he has, which is, I would rather take
something that I sincerely, being in your world and watching all the crap that you've gone through and what happened, because you will not break that oath, and the stuff that I see and the things that I know about from us being as close of friends, you and I and Elizabeth, as close of friends as we are, I commend you.
Well, thank you. And I haven't given away most of the stuff you told me either.
That's the part I like.
So
the
you're
most.
You want all this to be true, right? It's very important that it stays true. No, this is my ethics code, folks, and I've always been this way. So let's go back to what Peter or Skolnick has to say here.
But one more thing. I watch the hours of research you put in. I watch the diligence to it and the sources of information that you compile into these slide presentations. It's damn
reading Skolnick. It was the big insider source of the day. Just like later on you had other guys doing it, it was all Skolnick back then. He was on Jeff Rentz all the time as a guest. He wrote tons of articles. They were very revealing. They
Is
showed
he still
you all
alive now?
No, he died, unfortunately. And his website got sanitized, so the only way you can find it now is going to the Reds link. So, anyway, back to this slide. This, remember, was written on Halloween night, and he asks this question before it happened. Will King, at least in Moscow in the past, when there was a so-called emergency, they would play somber symphonic music on the radio for 24 hours.
That is so funny. Now, at least we haven't had that yet.
No music. Where's my music?
I agree, because nobody listens to it.
Nobody wants to believe this stuff.
They can't.
Okay, so now we're going to...
You're proving what people feel is true.
And it's all along.
Yeah.
It's this trail of breadcrumbs, the whole
proving
history of U.S. elections from the beginning of mechanical voting machines to today. It's never stopped. Now let's back to the slide again. On December the 8th, after this actually happened and he was proven correct, which, by the way, he didn't even take credit for being right, other people, covert operation. And obviously his implied answer is yes, or he wouldn't have titled it that way, right? I'm not going to say that word, or that acronym. Old-timers with covert operations expertise, I think I might have one here today, felt in their gut. In spy parlance, they suspected the American people are victims of quote-unquote black ops. Well, there you go.
And that's true.
It is true. Invoking national security, they love to do that. The U.S. block ordered the major press and wire services to play down, if not entirely omit, any possible clown complicity mentioned in an Associated Press story that was later removed or spiked. So they got to play it down. Thursday, December 7th, 4:15 a.m., this is again 2000, Florida official admits helping the GOP, and then the part that's not on the rest of the headline would be helping the GOP win the election, which means steal the election. By Vicky Chacher, Associated Press writer in Tallahassee, Florida. This got removed from the internet. Remember Bush. A former blankety-blank agent said he was trying to help GOP voters. A county election official said she let Republican operatives correct absentee ballot applications. Uh-oh. Is that not legal, would you say?
It's illegal.
It's totally illegal. You can't let them help you correct the... Look at how many is involved. Okay, back to the slide. Thursday in the contested election. In Leon County Circuit Court, attorneys representing voters who alleged Republicans tampered with absentee B application forms asked judges to throw out as many as 25,000 absentee Bs from Seminole and Martin counties. So there again, they were
system.
They were helping. They were over here. They were helping the Republicans.
It was in the hundreds.
It was the hundreds. Yeah, it was nothing. So what does this show you?
It was 600 disputed ballots.
It was something like that. It was really small. So what this shows you is that by helping ballots that would be legally disqualified, which means marking them, altering them, okay, that's V tampering. V meaning, you know what that means. It's V tampering, folks. 25,000 of them. And it was in the AP. And then they had to get rid of it. Okay? Let's keep reading. Charles Kane. Wait till you get to know this guy. Maybe you do know.
I know who he is.
Oh, you know who he is. Oh boy, here we go. Charles Kane, who testified he worked for the FBI and retired from the blankety blank in 1975, said nothing secretive and sinister occurred. We had an obligation to them, he said, of Republicans who had received an inaccurate ballot document. Of course, you have an obligation to win, right? Oh my God. You have an obligation, huh? Well, it's not legal. We had filled out their forms. He frickin' admitted it. We did not see this as altering. All we saw this as was correcting a problem caused by the Republican Party of Florida, those nasty people. A later AP version, Skolnick says, omitted all of the above matters. So let's get to know a little bit more about this guy from Skolnick, Charles Kane. Which, by the way, in case you don't already know this, the DS, or whatever you want to call them, they are in love with the last name Cain because they see that as the bloodline of Lucifer. In other words, let's go over here. Their religion stipulates that there were two bloodlines from Adam and Eve. There was the bloodline of Isaac and the bloodline of Abraham, I believe it is. And then one of the two, I forget which one, becomes, the son is Cain, and that becomes the Cain bloodline. And I think it's Isaac, right?
I don't think, I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm not sure either, okay? I don't remember all the details, but the bottom line is that if you get into their religion, they believe that the name Cain represents the bloodline of their heavenly father, which is a lot different than ours. And in two very recent presidential elections, the name Cain was either in the vice president or the presidential slot. You have McCain with Palin, and then you have Hillary, who ran with Kaine. Cain. Okay. So and then he's got the last name. So this is like if you're a Muslim and your last name is Muhammad or your first name is Muhammad. They love that. And same thing with the DS. Okay, so let's learn more about him from school.
Even deeper, but take it one step deeper. We're not just talking about the politics of world control and domination. You're talking about a religious order.
Absolutely.
That's the point that you just established.
That's
it's
right.
deeper than the political lightness that we make fun of as we watch it, and you're exposing a deeper subtle agenda.
It gets really stinky when you get into this stuff.
Think about what you're saying, and it's true.
And think about that creepy picture I showed you at the beginning when we zoomed in on the eyes. I mean, whoa! And that's the one they used. That's the picture they used. You zoom in on the eyes, and it's like
there's nothing there.
It's like crazy. Okay. Here we go. Even in the apparently suppressed story, Associated Press left out plenty. And here's what Skolnick has to say. Retired blankety blank and other agency covert operations agents contend that Charles Cain, who testified in the Martin County, Florida case, is the same Charles Cain they have known for many years, and apparently you knew about him too. They describe Charles Cain as being reportedly as follows. Now, before we read that, this is an actual picture I found today. It says Charles Cain, Martin County, Florida Republican Party Executive Committee member, on C-SPAN during campaign 2000. So you can go online today and you can watch his entire testimony as he said, oh, everybody should move on, there's nothing to see here, no big deal. So let's go into what Charles Cain is all about. According to Skolnick, when he was younger, Charles Cain reportedly looked almost exactly like Lee Harvey Oswald of President John F. Kennedy. Several assassination researchers in their magazine articles and books have described how Oswald was framed up with situations, quote-unquote, involving Oswald lookalikes. The book, he's not actually, let's go to the close shot, yeah. So this is where he's being very cagey. He's not actually saying that Charles Cain was a lookalike, but obviously he knows that he was, and probably because of some oaths that he signed or something. So, Dannion, let's just talk about that for a minute.
Being smart.
How could you use a guy who looks just like Oswald? What would be an example?
The legendary picture of Oswald with a rifle. That anybody who understands the graphics now knows that head was. His head was placed on there, that it never was Oswald holding this rifle in the picture.
Oh, wow.
So if you had situations where you would put him at a Cuban event, which was always the Cuban issue, you'd put this same lookalike at events so that you would put a time and a date that he was there. So you create the narrative of who you want him to be identified as.
Right. So they build the whole backstory
using
with stand-ins.
a lookalike.
People say, oh my God, that's him.
And he was there and I saw him.
Wow.
When it really wasn't him, same clothes, same lookalike. This is probably...
You saw Charles Cain working as a lookalike for Oswald?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I understand how it works.
Right.
I know exactly what you do to build a backstory. And I can listen to what you're describing and see how the backstory would work.
So this guy's a professional, skilled operator who's going to go in there, do the job, pose as somebody else, and never break a sweat, and never act like he's anybody other than Lee Harvey Oswald.
Here's the most important point about that. the only way that he could operate in America was through the FBI. He worked for the FBI, but he retired from the CIA, which means how he could break the law. The CIA is not allowed to operate inside of America.
Or whatever we're going to call it.
Well, whatever you want to call it. They could not break it, so they would run him. They would run control through the FBI, which is domestic, and still accomplish their same project.
Right. So they work as a joint unit, is what you're saying.
You can bypass the law
to get rid of the domestic problem.
Yeah,
okay,
to
that's
bypass
very
the
interesting.
law.
That's very interesting. So this book suppressed in the U.S., Farewell America, has an extensive detailing of this very thing. And I guess we could probably look that up. Okay. Next, Charles Kane was reportedly part of the blankety-blank's super-secret, bloody, dirty tricks project. So what would bloody, dirty tricks be about? Super-secret, bloody, dirty tricks.
Whatever it took to win. Whatever it took to achieve the goal.
In any country.
America. Look at what year with the time period you're talking about.
Next one. Charles Kane reportedly played a role in blankety-blank's aborted invasion in 1961 of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs.
Same people.
Same thing.
All the way through, it's the same people.
Right.
All these people came from the Bay of Pigs.
Blankety mafia gangsters. Now that they're combining those two together, including Sam Momo Giancana, murdered with an OSS special type assassin gun in blankety blank. Kane was also reportedly active with Johnny Roselli, a blankety-blank mafia operative murdered shortly after Giancana.
But he was the hitman.
Well, yeah.
Johnny was a...
Now look at this. Some is Sam and Chuck Giancana with Bettina Giancana double-cross the explosive inside story of the mobster who controlled America. Very interesting. Now look at this.
He had the same girl...
Including Giancana, plant 8,000 fraudulent ballots in Chicago that enabled John F. Kennedy to carry Illinois. He traded them, but isn't it interesting, Dannion? I mean, I don't even... It actually makes me really sad. Let's go to this one again. It makes me really sad to say that there's compelling evidence that JFK might have stolen this election in 1960. However... we have, for whatever reason, they didn't want Nixon yet.
That's his father.
Right?
Remember, that's his father.
Right.
His father did all that. JFK didn't do any of that.
Let's go back over to Dan.
JFK didn't do any of that. His father, the military-industrial complex and the ability to wage war and how that was working, he was listed. So he brought his brother in as the Attorney General. And the Attorney General was going after the mafia, Hoffa, all the mobsters. He was going after Johnson. He was going to wipe that money-making control.
This is my speculations, but why do you think they might have wanted to rig it for Kennedy and not Nixon? What might be some reasons why they wanted Kennedy? Why the DS would want Kennedy before he turned on him?
Because his father could control him. He thought his father could control him.
Okay.
His father was... he was the insider. He was Roosevelt's man, who's to establish this dynasty, which is what his father's dream always was. And it was for Joe. It was JFK's older brother that he had designed it, but he got killed in World War II. So it left him making a hero out of him. Federal Reserve out. He was going to print Treasury notes.
I know, it's so beautiful. So Pete Peterson, I think this is a good time to say this. Pete Peterson, one of my classified, he said that he was actually there in the room when Bobby Kennedy was shot. And that Joe Kennedy, Sr., the insider reports, and I don't have the slide for this right now, but the
I would
insider
believe
reports,
that was true.
The insider reports are that Carter is a half Kennedy. That Carter was the illegitimate son of Joe Kennedy when he was with... I don't have a slide for that. You have to do this online somewhere else. But they look a lot alike. So I don't know if that's true. It's just a rumor that I'll have another one in the White House within 10 years.
Well, that would be the nature of his father. That would be the absolute
He's that
nature.
evil, huh?
He was that bought into control.
Wow.
He was that bought into control. I don't have any ranks, admiral, and coming up through Nimitz and all of those old DSers, the people who developed after World War II that created the OSS into that gang of clowns. That created Rockefeller and West Virginia, and then why Georgia? Why would you take him from the South? Why would you consolidate the South?
Right.
Why would you do it at that time? And why, when Bush, the same things put itself in place? But keep going.
So let's think about how mad Nixon might have been to have the election stolen out from under him and to know it, obviously. So he got his revenge. That's the next part.
They call the family jewels.
Nixon later played a key role at blankety blank's based immediately, and that's just the way these things go. You know, he's playing the dirty tricks, and then he becomes president. And it was only after Nixon became president that the war on Vietnam really ramped up, and that's when my father had time. We're already at an hour and 45 minutes here, so. Charles Kane was for many years reportedly part of the executive action, but in more recent years, dirty tricks, short of actual political murders, although in the past they were doing...
But that's not true at all.
Did you ever hear the term executive action?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Everybody knows what that term means. It's called sanction with extreme prejudice.
Extreme prejudice, David.
Yeah, that's the other word for it.
Make it real messy.
Sanction with extreme
We got to
prejudice.
joke about it because it's so horrible. It's the only way you can...
But you're weaving all...
And we
may be being tricked.
You think?
My God, think about it. Look at the... Well, you'll do it.
All right.
The voting systems today.
Back to the slide. Has the blankety blank's complicity in orchestrating the floor blankety blank surfaced by way of the testimony of Charles Kane? That was his pet theory of why would this guy come forward? Maybe there's two factions or something. I don't think that's what it is. Why then was he a witness in the Martin County case? I think just as a disinformation specialist. Would you agree with that, or do you think...
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's keep going. This is really, really interesting, folks. Look at this.
He knew he would get away.
1876 by Gore Vidal. And he says, Skolnick says, he's a distant relative of Albert Gore Jr. Fancy people use their grandmother's last name as their first name. So here is the book, 1876. Notice that Lady Liberty has been blindfolded. Here's another version of the book. It was a #1 bestseller. Gore Vidal, top author of his time. And sure enough, just as Skolnick said, I checked it today, and it is true. This book was reprinted on February 15th, 2000. So here it is on Amazon right now. 1876, a novel, paperback, February 15th, 2000. And then it says right here, if you read this whole thing, and we have this quoted later, so we'll go back to that. The point is the deep state has to tell you what they are doing, right? So if they're going to steal an E, they have to let you know that they plan to do that in advance.
I watch the politics of it, and I understand how evil all of that is.
Right.
And understand how operatives work. But each time that they have to tell us, then that's some ritual or tradition that's deeper than politics, intrigue, murder, all that. It's something much deeper, which is what better everybody needs to grasp that as a perspective. There is something really deep.
They're doing because it gives them... Let's go over again. It gives them apparently the authorization. That's what we hear from insiders, is that with very, very big pockets, very huge amounts of money involved, huge amounts of intent involved, and it's very specific. It's like dialing an IP address. So if they want something to get done, if they want something to work that involves screwing us, they have to do this. They have to let us know in advance. Then, apparently, there's some universal law that just works, and they're aware of it, that if we know, at least if we have the opportunity to know that we've been screwed, then the
Pathetic.
So they have to do this, folks.
Okay.
They have to do this over and over again to tell you what they're doing, to show you their symbols, show you their iconography. So republishing this book in February when the election is in November... And the book totally lays out the exact blueprint that they followed for the 2000 election. Exactly the same. And we're going to read that right now. So let's go back to the slide. Check this out.
This is so great, David.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Great.
Thank you. I'm trying to keep it we're going to be at 2 hours pretty quick, but we're going to get through this. And we'll hopefully be not more than 2.5 hours.
Well, let's do it.
So, okay. So this is actually from Amazon that I just was on, where it says this. The centennial of the U.S. was celebrated with great fanfare and perhaps the most underhanded political machination in the country's history, the theft of the presidency from Samuel Tilden in favor of Rutherford B. Hayes. This was the Gilded Age. Now, this is in the description for the book, right? When robber barons held the purse strings of the nation, and the party in power was determined to stay in power. Done by robber barons who hold the purse strings, and they're determined to stay in power. They tell you everything about what they're doing right there. That's the whole revealing of the method, as they like to call it. They have to reveal the method.
I see. I mean, it just makes so much sense.
Yep. Now let's go back to Skolnick and what he has to say about this weird thing. Originally published in 1976 by Random House Incorporated, the last 80 pages or so of the book give the details of the Samuel Tilden Rutherford B. Hayes election struggle of 1876. This was an extremely close election, where one candidate got a plurality of the national popular vote, and the other got the majority electoral college vote, which is exactly what happened in 2000. Gore won the popular vote and lost the electoral vote in the Supreme Court. Conspiracy theorists assert that the year 2000 election seems to use the book 1876 as a nearly exact blueprint for how the nation could be divided up. Tilden, according to Gore Vidal's book, never conceded, but lived out his life contending that he had been the elected president. And here the poor guy is Tilden, probably working off some nasty past life karma to have to go through all this, but we do feel bad for him. And this whole thing nearly triggered a war. As Skolnick says, Tilden sought at the site of the presidential inauguration to be sworn in as the elected president, and he was actually blocked by armed troops. As recreated in Vidal's book, the country almost boiled over into a second American Civil War over this election theft. And then they reprint the book in 2000, just months before they do it again.
Well, we better make sure they reprint it this month. Last month.
Little known to the public, all the major establishment news networks and newswire services about to run stories about the American blankety blank must get prior clearance from the agency. In the U.S., there is a non-statutory version of Britain's Official Secrets Act requiring articles to be circulated affecting national security to be first submitted to be approved. Based on anything that you might think, do you believe this is true?
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough.
I can guarantee it's done that way. Or if you print it, it disappears before it makes it into print.
And that's what he's going to say right here. In a like fashion in the U.S., such articles have to be submitted in advance to the blank censorship board or a similar, almost unknown agency or commission. British press outlets and newswire services that run afoul of the law are subject to having their equipment, presses, radio, and television transmitting instruments, buildings, and vehicles seized by the London government. There you go. If you don't do this, you're going to get shut down. On the other hand, American outlets, under presidential edict rather than law by Congress, if accused of being about to violate quote-unquote national security, which means don't say those three letters, they are subject to having their satellite links blocked by the super-secret Satellite Operations Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO.
In Chantilly.
Their websites can be shut down, and their wire service connections, domestic and overseas, terminated, just like you said, Dannion. There it is.
And all their calls and all their emails have already been recorded.
That's right.
So then you build the same story. You create a story for who they are and what they are.
And remember, all the way back in 2000, they were talking about Echelon back then, and the fact that all these things are being captured. And it wasn't until 2013 with Snowden that we actually got that publicly. But all of these same people like Skolnick, they were talking about this way back before it ever became known to everyone. The U.S. Secret Service reserves the arbitrary power to themselves to keep uncooperative journalists from attending important press conferences by denying them mandatory press credentials and security clearances, thus making the uncooperative journalists unemployable. The American blankety blank and their privatized adjuncts, such as reportedly Wackenhut, have long engaged in overthrowing foreign governments, assassinating popular U.S. leaders and officials, and causing fake foreign and domestic emergencies and coups. Well,
I would say that was true.
And you could double click on that last one there and think about a lot of stuff in this year and wonder, I wonder.
Well,
Anyway, that's all we're going to say.
In the last 16.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is what they do. And you know this.
This is 16.
You were on the inside. You know
Yeah,
this.
I know exactly this is how it works.
Why is it hard then to believe they would not also orchestrate on a vast scale the overthrowing of the American government to favor, for example, the British itching to return us to a puppet colony status? Some contend we may see the American Constitution overthrown by such means and the nation run by martial law as a way of dealing with an expected U.S. financial debacle. This was nearly a year before 9/11. So let's go back and look at that again, folks, because remember, this is in 2000, before that happened, okay? And what does it say right there? A year before. That we may see some kind of martial law and an expected U.S. financial debacle that overthrows the Constitution. Well, what we saw was actually the USA Patriot Act, which, as you well know, is exactly the same as the German Constitution.
And Homeland Security is the same term the Germans used as they consolidated the intelligence. And Bushes Bushes are German.
And the current group that's causing a lot of trouble, it starts with anti, has the exact same flag as the ones the Germans were using for the same thing. And everybody knows that. It's all over the internet now.
But that symbology becomes so important in the most sinister part that I begin to perceive as you are talking.
The magical practice, right. They got to tell you what they're doing, so they use the same symbols, the same signatures, the same words, the same logos that they used in Germany. Same thing. So that's amazing because he predicted that in advance. And it actually did have a big economic effect when 9/11 happened.
It's just amazing.
So now we're going to go dial backwards to November 15th. This is after he was proven correct. Because remember, he leaked that intel on October 31st, Halloween, right? So he said that there was going to be, that he had profound sources that said there was going to be some kind of constitutional crisis with the election. So then after it started, this is what he said on November 15th. Long-time sources now in retirement in the intelligence community have been contending to him for some time prior to the year 2000 election that it would be orchestrated on a mammoth scale using this prior historical example of 1876 as a blueprint. So he was getting multiple intel leaks well before the election that this was going to all be orchestrated and they'd use 1876 to do it. Some contend the fine hand of the American blankety-blank is evident in the year 2000 election ruckus. Through a reported computer glitch, upwards of 65,000 presidential e-ballots disappeared in Tennessee, causing presidential candidate Albert Gore Jr. to be embarrassed by supposedly not carrying his own home state during the election.
Arrogance. The absolute arrogance of them. The arrogance to do the same thing to him as the little guy in West Virginia, to deny his own. Who in the world?
Now you're from North Carolina,
South
right?
Carolina.
South Carolina. Sorry. It's a lot of slides. South Carolina. Anybody? I mean, you're very loyal to your state, right?
Everybody is.
And so, who in the world in Tennessee wouldn't vote for Gore?
Ain't gonna happen.
It's Tennessee. I mean, there's loyalty in the South, right?
Exactly.
You've talked to me about this. The Northerners don't really have that.
I don't have any problems whether he would win his state in a presidential election because all that stuff matters historically to a Southerner.
Right.
There is a nature of the Southern heritage that you would never deny that. And why you saw me react so fast, of the arrogance of them to deny him that, I mean, look at what he got. He got an Oscar, and he gave $200 million selling energy credits, and he won a Grammy.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if he sang any songs, but he won probably a Peace Prize. I mean, they gave him everything, but that is just to let you know how much in control they were. The same thing as it was when the guy ran for the governorship in West Virginia.
And I will say, let's go over here real quick. I will say that other insiders that I had access to told me that Gore was not really a good guy per se. Obviously, he came right out of he was a vice president under Clinton. It's just a difference in strategy of how to handle things. So Gore According to my sources, Gore represented the British Rothschild side, where their goal was to actually kick the teeth in of the oil cartel and use more of the financial industry, control the world with financial and banking. Okay, banking is British, oil is American, right? So the British side had Gore. What does he do? He comes out with Inconvenient Truth, which, as you said, was an award-winning documentary. Gore was responsible for that. And they want to do these carbon credits and really try to kill the oil industry, whereas the
New Green Deal.
The Bush side was the total oil dynasty, right? So it's the two dynasties fighting over, are we going to kill the oil industry or are we going to build up the oil industry? And of course,
called the petrodollar, the reserve currency of the world. How do you crush a nation? You destroy the reserve currency of the world. You destroy it. How do you destroy it? You put oil, which is the petrodollar, you put it in dilemma.
Right. So the British side could have been trying to hurt the U.S. because of their plan and what they were going to do the following year anyway.
I don't think that they could have. I think you're describing it exactly the way it operates.
Exactly. So they knew what they were going to do in 2001, which, if you look at the Bible, and there's another whole scholarship on this over here again, it is the 2001 September 11th is exactly 2,000 years to the date after the biblically correct birthday of Jesus, supposedly.
The beginning
and there's
of the Jubilee.
there's a whole thing in the Bible about a particular astronomical alignment that occurs exactly on September 11th, 2001. In fact, right at the exact window of time that the planes hit is the exact biblically correct 2,000-year anniversary, which is supposed to be the return of the Messiah in Christian lore, right? These people hate that stuff. So why not take the exact 2,000-year anniversary of Jesus' alleged birth down to the minute and make it the day in infamy, the most reviled moment in American history?
Well, World War II and the bombing of Hawaii.
Yeah, but there's
and to call it
9/11.
And to call it 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, to call it that is utter absolute arrogance.
Right. Because it's a psychic driving mind control thing.
That you
where
are helpless.
You dial 911 to get the
police. You are not helpless. If there's just a phone call away to safety, 911. To do that shows the arrogance. I can see the evilness, David, from watching this. Because mine is a surface viewpoint.
Right.
Okay, other than the boxes of knowledge, it's a surface viewpoint. But the evilness of the arrogance of how they think we are and how foolish we are, they're going to learn their lesson this time.
Okay, so going back to the slide, it's really ridiculous that Gore didn't win his own state in the deep, deep South.
Impossible.
And then let's go on here. Family patriarch George Herbert Walker Bush has a lot to answer for, which the oil-soaked monopoly press never seems to question. The elder Bush, as we have demonstrated, together with three of his sons, George W., Jeb, who was governor of Florida during this thing in the recount, right? Everybody remembers that. George W., Jeb, and Neil have 25 super-secret bank accounts worldwide, through which they have laundered tens of billions of dollars of illicit funds from dope traffic, weapons smuggling, and clandestine and illegal gold smuggling overseas. Would you say that that's likely to be true?
I'd say it's 100% true.
Okay, fair enough. The Commissar of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, we prefer to label him Redspan because we're going into the red, right? There's nothing green about it. We're dying here as a country. Through his secret authorization codes, Alan Greenspan arranged these clandestine wire transfers for the Bush family. Isn't that interesting? See our website series, Greenspan Aids and Bribes Bush, and documents thereto attached. And now we finally get to the good stuff, folks. The one you've been waiting for, if you've been itching in your seat, wondering, is David going to talk about it? Is David going to talk about it? Yes, I am. The blankety-blank voting machine scandal. And now we're getting too close to the president. I'm not going to say the word, okay? We're just going to call it the D. The D voting machine scandal. And this was all blown out there by a true American patriot and hero, Congressman Dennis Kucinich, in 2003. Here he is. And the write-up I'm about to read to you, I'm going to read you almost the entire thing because it's so good, was featured on the government's own House of Representatives congressional website, house.gov. So this is real. Okay? You can find it now on archive.org if you type in the link in the Wayback Machine. It's now under a tab called Web. But here it is. So this is actually a snapshot of house.gov. It was published originally around December the 2nd, 2003. That's the earliest one I could find on archive. So that's around when it came out. And then it disappeared a couple of years later after he made a very sizable update on April 28th, 2005. So what you're seeing here is the 2005 captures for this particular page. You see April on the top right, and the 28th has got a big blue circle around it. And then you'll notice that when you get into July 1st, now all of a sudden the circles go from being blue, which means nothing has been changed, to being green. So as of July 1st, it turns green. This is only, as you can see, barely 2 months after the final changes were applied, and it disappears and turns into what we call a 302 error. Every single screen capture on the Wayback Machine after this is what you get. An HTTP 302 response at crawl time, meaning it's no longer online. And this one happens to be July 1st, 2005, the very beginning of when this started. And this, if you type in the link right now today, it says the requested page could not be found, finding the page you want, and it's not there. So we're going to drag this out of the memory hole and give Kucinich his due in this historical moment we're in right now and read from the final deleted version of what he had to say. So here we go. Congressman Kucinich is seeking to ensure that voting is a right secured for all Americans. During the 2000s, there were numerous and serious problems at the voting bees in Florida and across the nation. Notice he says serious, numerous and serious. This is a big deal. Congress's response was to pass the Help America Vote Act in 2001, which they then ignored. This legislation was designed to improve voting machines and voting processes. However, implementation of the Help America Vote Act, along with its funding and assistance to states, is far behind schedule, of course. Additionally, a recent analysis of voting machine software shows that these programs suffer, again that word, serious internal flaws that threaten the security of votes cast on such machines. Surprise, surprise. And this is a headline in there, Privatized Voting, Private Interests. Under the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, which again never went anywhere, the Election Assistance Commission is charged with establishing voluntary standards for voting machine software and creating an independent testing process for the software. However, this process is far behind schedule, and they never did anything.
I was laughing because I know how true that is.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous. Welcome to today.
Without this federal review and testing of software, this is Kucinich on the House.gov website, deeply flawed software has been marketed by companies and bought by states. An analysis of an electronic voting system was recently authored by Tadayoshi Kono, Adam Stubblefield, Aviel Rubin, and Dan Wallach. An analysis of an electronic voting system, that's the name. This voting software, purchased by D, has already been purchased by 2 states. According to this study, some of the most serious of numerous flaws permit a person to, here we go, a person, or in this case a technician on the inside, could vote multiple times for the same candidate. That's illegal, of course. View ballots that were already cast on a machine. Go in there, take a look, take a peek, see how it's going. Modify your party affiliation on your ballot. They could change you from Republican to Democrat. Cause your vote to be miscounted, which means it never gets counted, or it gets counted as the opposite side. Create, delete, and modify the votes on a machine. And tamper with the audit logs and election results. In other words, he says elsewhere, they can go in, they can see how many votes have been cast, they can change them, and then they can erase the record of ever having gone in there and done anything. Doesn't that sound a little bit familiar? Doesn't that sound a little bit like Smartmatic and Dominion and all this crap that's going on right the heck now, which we're not even really going to talk about too much because there's so much evidence it's coming in by the truckload. Day after day, week after week now, you're going to see this thing exploding. This is not going to go away. and it is the salvation of planet Earth, in my opinion. Sorry, touching the mic. This is going to save our butt. This is what we needed, and I'm so glad that finally all of this dark, dirty stuff that's been going on the whole time that nobody cared about, they tried to pass laws, they get ditched. Finally, we're dealing with this thing. Finally, it's happening.
I agree. And just watching what you're saying, and when you look at international, how this system is present today, our votes are being counted in Germany or Spain.
So we heard, yes, there was a server in Germany. Yep.
So we heard that the
Merkel
votes,
was in on it, most likely.
well,
we don't know that
I
yet,
don't
but-
know that. I'm not going to say that. But if you have a company that is Serbian programmers, and there is our votes are being tabulated in a foreign country.
Well, and remember, I mean, this gets into material that, let's go over here. This gets into material that we're not actually, I don't have slides for them because it is so common and heard right now, but if you watch like Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, the people who are on the front lines right now, I highly recommend dig up everything you can on both of them, watch every video, even if you don't like the network they're on, just watch the stuff. Please watch what they're saying, as many as you can. Because what we find out is that this software was invented in Venezuela
By the Cubans.
in order to make sure that Chavez keeps winning. And then when they saw how well it worked, they bought the system and they installed it right here in the good old US of A. Isn't that something?
And it's true.
And history repeats itself yet again. Because the Chavez system worked better than anything else. It was so easy.
The same
it was
way
so
that-
manipulable.
same-
Just like Shoup.
Just like Nelson did.
Yeah, with Shoup. Yep.
Okay, you got it. And it's the same, but
History
we
repeats
are
itself,
not,
folks.
we are not falling for it. This
No.
is the point that, like you said before, people are not standing up, but I believe that people are
Well, now
standing
they are.
up.
Now they are.
Yeah, I mean,
In the past, they didn't.
they
But
didn't.
This is a long-term cancer that we finally have to cut out and remove. All right, back to the slides. So again, some of the most serious of numerous flaws. He's not even describing all of them. There's so many. But you can view, you can modify, you can miscount, you can tamper with the audit. Nobody's going to know what you did. They found 328 security holes. And as a result of this study, this is very significant, folks, the state of Maryland stopped buying the machines. They actually put it on hold. And then later, an independent review confirmed the previous findings. This is actually true, legally provable fact. It counted 328 different security weaknesses in the system. And the conclusion of this secondary independent review was, quote, the system as implemented in policy, procedure, and technology is at high risk of compromise. Obviously.
Welcome to today.
The state of Ohio selected D as one of 4 possible vendors for computerized voting machines. But in August 2003, the company's partisan conflicts of interest prompted public suspicion that the voting machine manufacturer was partisan. This is when it all starts to erupt, August 2003. Partisan conflicts of interest. In August 2003, after returning from President Bush's Crawford, Texas ranch, the chief executive of D wrote a fundraising letter to his own people that he was trying to get money from, where he stated that his company, D, was committed to helping Ohio deliver its electoral votes to the president next year. Was he high or drunk?
No,
or
he's just full of himself.
I mean, my God.
The arrogance that they operate with, the just unwavering arrogance, knowing that nothing's going to happen to them.
Right, and they'll sell you your governorship for $250,000. You want to buy your votes? They'll sell them to you, buddy.
Yes,
How much you want for these votes? Okay, here we go. Back to the slide. Not only have the above memos demonstrated company knowledge of software flaws, but D specifically instructs their employees to misrepresent these flaws under questioning, according to their own election support guide published on October 21st, 2002. This manual is provided to the individuals who work directly with voting machines and systems on Election Day. According to the election support guide, V recounts may yield different B totals instead of improved accuracy. They may yield different totals. Look at this. This is in the manual now. He's quoting from it. And this is again on the House.gov website from Dennis Kucinich, Congressman. Ideally, right? A recount might yield exactly the same results as the initial count. However, in the case of AccuVote operating system ballots, this is qualified by the following considerations. These considerations become increasingly relevant over larger quantities of ballots. Number one, and they're making all these excuses, right? Poorly cut ballots may not necessarily give identical results upon repeat counts. Wink, wink. Right? That's the hanging Chad thing. Number two, AccuVote OS units with slightly skewed sensors may not necessarily give identical results upon repeated counting. They're telling you what to say when they get caught, folks. That's what this is.
Exactly.
Number three, refeeding AccuVote OS ballots may smear voting marks across the ballot as well as leave traces of the roller on the ballot, which may not necessarily give identical results upon repeat counts.
They tell you exactly how they're going to do it.
Irrespectively, we must always promote that our voting systems are consistent and accurate. Page 34, even though they know that it's not. They're telling their own people over here, they're telling their own people to lie. We must represent the consistency and accuracy of our results, even though there's these things that could go wrong. So if we get caught, please use these excuses, everybody. That's what he's saying. It's crazy. And then look at this. It goes on from here. Back to the slide. The Election Support Guide instructs employees to deceive customs agents about the fact that they will be working on an election. U.S. Customs. In other words, you come in from a foreign country, you say, yeah, I want to vote. I'm going to the election.
So you'd be a software person, or
right. Provide a terse explanation of what your job is, as well as the business the company you work for is in. Under no circumstances should you indicate that you intend on working in the United States. Well, that's fraud.
100%.
They know what you're going to do. And then this is really funny. Look at this one. D employees are instructed to provide as little communication as possible. Section 3.2. You will generally be considered to promote your ignorance.
That is hilarious.
You're generally going to be considered a paragon of knowledge on the election, but don't promote your ignorance. Don't let them know that you don't really know crap. Okay? In case of doubt, call a designated contact who may be more knowledgeable than you. So ridiculous. Let's go back again. Do not offer, that's actually how it was written, do not offer damaging opinions of our systems even when their failings become obvious. In other words, always say that it works. And these are what they're telling their own people right on page 10. Even if you didn't make it that far through the manual, you probably made it to page 10. And that's enough, okay? D's ballot, this is back to Kucinich now. Remember, this is on the government's own Congress website. D's ballot processing components are not completely accurate, but employees are instructed to say that they are, or blame ballot printing or workers for the problem, right? The printing is the problem. Do not promote the fact that the AccuVote OS is anything but absolutely accurate in this case. In case you encounter numerous undefined marks, indicate that ballot printing is at fault. So once again, it's so obvious here. The following two cases are the worst case scenarios when using the AccuVote OS. This is in the manual. Be very diplomatic in both cases, offering the minimum amount of information necessary to officials, like election monitors. If the counter did not increment when the ballot was processed, right? So here's the deal, okay? If you're there and you're running this ballot through the machine,
right,
and you're saying that it's a vote for Gore, and then it shows up as a vote for Bush, that's what could happen to you, right? They're preparing you for how to handle this, okay? Let's go back and read this. If the counter did not increment when they run the ballot through, well, possibly those workers were not very observant while they were using the AccuVote OS. They're stupid people, you know, they didn't know what they were doing. They weren't paying close attention. They didn't really watch anything. Oh my God. Otherwise, indicate that you are not able to provide an appropriate real time. Just say, well, you weren't looking at it right. Or if that doesn't work, oh, you just weren't looking. Well, I got to talk to my superiors. I don't know. The system is fine. Nothing ever happens like this. Don't worry about it. Back to the slide again. Unfortunately, again, this is Kucinich. Instead of working to improve voting machine accuracy and security, This document shows that D has attempted to cover up voting machine failings with secrecy and false statements. Congressman Kucinich demands that these flaws should never be tolerated. Correct. These findings of software flaws have been confirmed in internal memos from D employees, which he has on that website, which is now down. D has harassed internet service providers with legal action if they dare to post links to these incriminating memos. Doesn't that sound familiar, folks? Internet takedowns, right? Same thing back in 2000. Transparency and public oversight are essential in the development of V machines. Of course they are. From conversations between employees at D, including upper management, it is evident that they knew of insecure programs and that they knew they were making insecure changes to these programs. In other words, that they could use it to steal. Among these activities, employees did the following, okay, and this is a list. Permitted easy access to vote audit logs without requiring so much as a password. Anyone could access the tabulation of votes and change their contents. And this is in a memo from Neil Finber to Ken Clark, and Ken Clark's response, government-supported evidence existed within the software. This was in a memo from Ken Clark. So once again, no password, anybody can change the contents, anybody can change it, and they sold it while knowing that the problems existed. They knew that the problems were there. They changed the software by sending uncertified patches and upgrades to their customers against their will, along with possible bugs. So they knew they were altering the machines even though they weren't supposed to. And this again, legal proof, memo from Ken Clark. They were written plan, little to no time for testing, and minimal resources. So they're basically lying to you and taking the money and doing something that they can't actually do.
They're achieving the goal.
Well, yeah, the goal is to steal.
Everything is to steal elections, and all that other stuff is just minor problems.
That's true.
Okay. How do you cover the minor
It
problems?
also seems to be an accepted practice to exaggerate our progress and functionality to our customers and ourselves, and then make excuses at delivery time when these products and services do not meet expectations. And this again is D has been using coercive legal claims, this is still Kucinich talking, to intimidate internet service providers and even universities to shut down their websites with links to these memos and remove the content of the memos, which proves something that's very relevant right now. Under copyright laws, however, D has intimidated numerous internet service providers in order to comply with its request. Well, that is evil. And doesn't this sound familiar?